We are constantly told the system is broken, overrun by entrenched insiders who prioritize their own survival over your welfare. The popular solution is to bring in a successful outsider, a business leader or a doctor, to clean house and run the government like a private company. That assumes managing a state requires the exact same skills as managing a corporate board. Government is not a firm. It operates on an entirely different set of incentives and constraints. Operating that machinery effectively is a highly specialized profession. The unglamorous procedural work of a lifelong public servant is actually what keeps the state functioning. When we look at the data on a true career politician, we see someone with a very specific, narrow occupational background. They spend their adult lives inside political circles, working as legislative aides, as party organizers, and eventually elected officials. A private sector entrant promises to disrupt the status quo. The careerist counters with institutional memory. They know exactly which levers to pull and which unwritten rules to follow to actually navigate a bill through the maze of competing interests. Let's set aside the partisan arguments and the emotional rhetoric. We can measure the actual return on investment of political experience using decades of municipal and federal data. Evaluating a politician requires looking at a long tenure in office, not as an automatic liability, but as a specialized portfolio of technical skills built specifically to run the state. In the early stages of any political career, there is a strict period of learning by doing. A newly elected generalist often hits a wall of administrative friction because they do not know how to direct the permanent bureaucracy. A careerist spends years mapping that exact landscape. This chart maps political tenure against efficiency in providing public goods. As politicians gain experience, their ability to deliver localized services rapidly accelerates. Those at the peak are deeply entrenched in unwritten rules, knowing exactly who to call to bypass zoning laws. The trade-off for voters is straightforward. You are choosing the slow, incremental mastery of procedure over the immediate, sweeping disruption that fresh faces promise on the campaign trail. When outsiders lack this foundational understanding, they often trigger systemic instability. They try to issue orders to agencies they do not fully understand, resulting in stalled projects and expensive legal battles. The hidden, tedious work of navigating agency protocols is the actual engine that converts ideological campaign promises into paved roads and funded infrastructure. That localized efficiency scales up to the federal level, where researchers track legislative effectiveness. Legislative effectiveness is a proven metric that measures a lawmaker's ability to advance their specific agenda through the legislative process and into enacted law. Highly professionalized state legislatures act as constructive training environments. They teach politicians how to draft viable bills and build coalitions before they ever reach Congress. This bar chart contrasts federal effectiveness scores based on prior experience. Lawmakers transitioning directly from state legislatures score significantly higher than citizen entrants. Digging deeper into occupational data, careerists trained as lawyers consistently outperform all other professional groups in passing legislation. Writing a law requires a deep understanding of statutory construction and complex multi-party negotiation. A background in business management does not replicate those specific technical requirements. Voters have to weigh the value of a candidate's relatable, private sector life experience against the cold reality of drafting bulletproof legal text. Passing federal legislation relies on rigorous technical discipline. It requires the exact specialized training that the career politician has spent decades acquiring. We can see how this works in practice by looking at a leader who leveraged the system for long-term stability rather than short-term crowd-pleasing. Angela Merkel was a PhD-trained physicist who methodically rose through the ranks of Germany's Christian Democratic Union over several decades to become chancellor. Her primary asset in office was relational competence. She learned how to bridge severe social and political divides by carefully out-scheming her challengers. Inside the Bundestag, the complex multi-party German federal parliament shown here, she used extreme tactical savviness. She practiced the soft absorption of her opposition's ideas, adopting their best slogans to neutralize competition and hold her coalition together. During the Euro crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, her deep relationships across the continent allowed her to maintain domestic stability through strict austerity, before eventually pivoting to collective EU loans when the timing was right. Her methodology required a specific trade-off. To maintain broad, incremental stability, she had to disappoint her own political base at a calculated rate that they could still absorb. Enduring national stability during acute, multi-year crises is generated by coalitional unity. That kind of unity can only be enforced by a deeply entrenched insider who knows exactly where the leverage lies. To fully evaluate the ROI of a politician, we have to measure national economic performance and sustained GDP growth. The empirical data shows that overarching national stability strongly correlates with leaders educated specifically in economics, rather than general business backgrounds. This visualization reveals a stark contrast. In their first year, economists oversee a 1.53% increase in GDP per capita growth, while under non-economists, the economy contracts. This growth happens because markets invest heavily when they anticipate stable, predictable, rules-based governance. Outsiders frequently lack this discipline. They often deploy macroeconomic populism, increasing immediate discretionary spending on infrastructure that benefits specific firms, while leaving long-term human capital and social spending completely untouched. True policy specialists understand the political dynamics of economic growth. They actively limit their own discretionary power to maintain market trust over the long haul. Achieving long-term economic stability means electing a technocrat willing to reject short-term financial handouts in favor of systemic institutional health. The career politician functions as the architectural foundation of strong institutions. They provide the necessary memory, the procedural rules, and the relational networks required to execute complex policy. Instructive, this voter priority matrix maps how your own goals align with these outcomes. The vertical axis measures your desire for disruption versus stability. The horizontal axis measures your focus on ideology versus complex policy. If you want high stability and highly complex policy, you land in the top right quadrant. This is the careerist domain, where we see the highest rates of sustained GDP growth and legislative efficiency. This maps directly to the pragmatic voter and the institutional designer. These are voters who view the government strictly as a complex machine that requires a trained, experienced operator. Statistically, a careerist is mathematically optimal in 3 specific scenarios: navigating deep bureaucratic gridlock, executing delicate international diplomacy, and managing long-term economic reform. The inverse is also true. If you are seeking purely symbolic disruption or want to dismantle the establishment entirely, a careerist's strict adherence to rules and procedural norms will leave you perpetually frustrated. In the modern era, deep political experience is not a liability you have to overcome. It is the ultimate functional asset. While a charismatic outsider might capture the cultural imagination, the unglamorous, procedural mastery of the career politician remains the only proven metric for converting your political intent into tangible reality.